No, you're not hearing things. And no, you're not seeing things. It is May 13th, and I've got to warm the shop up. It's silly. We got bags of parts from a crashed Kohler, and that crashed Kohler is right there, the Command 18 horse. So what happened? My guess is that the hydraulic lifter collapsed and allowed the push rod to drop and stay dropped, which allowed the rocker arm to pivot, and the rocker arm actually went through the valve cover. It stayed intact, it stayed on there, but we've got damage to the intake valve, damage to the springs, it was damage to everything. It did pop the keepers out when it happened. Kind of bizarre. I've never seen anything like it, but that's why I'm guessing that we have a collapsed lifter. And you get a little bit of junk in those, and they will. The hydraulic lifters will collapse on you. So just take a quick look here at the valve cover. I'll show you what it did. That rocker arm just decided it needed a little bit of air, and it just popped up through here, through this weak point. And it continued to rock, but it wasn't going the full motion. So I get a call. Hey, something's wrong with my mower. It's really down on power. Well, yeah, it's going to be down on power. The push rod and the spring and the seat and the keepers and the pivot, everything looks okay. Push rod, it all looks okay, but I'm not going to trust it. So we are going with all new, including the head. Let's get in here and take a look at all these yummy parts. And if I remember right, the total was $270 something. No, $264.95 for what I'm going to pull out of this box. And the kicker is, when you order a Briggs head, it's complete. It has the valves in it, the springs, the keepers, the rocker arms, the whole nine. It's got everything in it. You buy a Kohler head, it's bare. There is absolutely nothing in it. So we have a head gasket replacement kit, which comes with intake and exhaust manifolds and your washers and everything you need for that. We'll get the little bags first. And there's our rocker arm pivot. Here are our new keepers. This is our intake valve seal. Here's our new lifter. And like I say, they are hydraulic lifters. I don't know if you can see that little hole that's in there right there. But it comes with the camshaft lube, which rides right there on that surface. And then the push rod goes down in that hole. And this is spring loaded, and it's hydraulically controlled. Just so you don't have to do any valve adjustments. That's a nice thing about Kohlers. But my guess is it just got some junk in there, caused that lifter to collapse when it was supposed to, but just not return when it was supposed to. So we've got that to replace. There's our new rocker arm. We're still digging, we're still digging. Here's our lower spring perch. Still digging, still digging. There's the upper spring perch. Right there. This is on the number 1 cylinder on this engine, by the way. New push rod. New valve spring. And new valve. So, and I'll of course lap the valve in to make sure that it's lapped in there pretty good. And then in this box we have the number 1 cylinder valve cover that already has the crankcase vent hole in it, and comes with new bolts and the crankcase vent grommet. So we've got that, and the gasket. The gasket's down in the box too. And then we have the big part, the new head. So absolutely nothing in it except for the valve guides. That's all that's in this. It is and the valve seats. It is a bare head, just absolutely bare. I don't get it, but I guess that's how Kohler makes more money, because you can buy a Briggs head for 120 bucks completely loaded with all this stuff except for the lifter, or you can spend what was just this head, $155.70 for just the head. Yeah, way to go, Kohler. You guys are flipping awesome. So anyway, we've got all of this that we've got to put in that Scag mower. It's a 1995 model. We'll go over there and check the hours. I don't recall what the hours are, so let's go take a look. 1,042 hours. Sorry, I've got the seat in the way. 1,042 hours. So I got over there, and he had owned it for a number of years. I asked him when the last time was he changed the air filter. He goes, "Oh, I don't change it, I just blow it out." No, you have to change them. Then I asked him when was the last time he changed the spark plugs, and he said, never. I wished I'd have kept the spark plugs. Oh, I have one. Hang on. Yeah, the spark plugs looked really good. I think it's still back here in the back of, yep, there it is. I took it out and just held on to it. Well, can you see that? How's that for an awesome spark plug? So it's got new spark plugs in it. But anyway, we're going to start turning wrenches. I am going to extract the engine to do this, just to make my job a little easier. So we'll get it up on the engine test stand. It ought to be a lot of fun, huh? So you guys stay tuned. I'm not going to put you through everything I've got to do to get this out. But once I've got it out, we'll set it up on the engine test stand, start getting all the plastics and everything off, and get this head off, pull that lifter out, and see if that isn't the culprit. See if it wasn't that lifter. That you can see this plug's just nasty. But anyway, that's what we're gonna do. I'm into it. 7.5 minutes. It's probably going to be a multi-part video, so I will see you guys when that engine is on the engine test stand. If I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's, we should be able to just lift her right on up out of there now. Let's see what happens. Steady as she goes. Make sure we're not caught on anything here. I didn't forget anything. Looks like I got it all. It's a good thing, huh? Oil filter and all that over here. Has a external oil filter. Check that out. I'm surprised I didn't forget a wire. Now we're going to move her over to the workbench engine stand, which is over yonder. Set her down. Success. Hang on, I'll take you guys for a ride. Move the toolbox over here. What a mess. We'll get that all cleaned up too. Be sure that we've got a shot of it so that when my neighbor gets it back, he'll see how clean everything is. We'll clean the hydros too. But where we had our crash, you'll be able to see a little bit better here in just a second, as soon as I get the toolbox moved into a good spot. Oh, by the way, the MTD is gone. The old MTD ranch hand or whatever it was called. But the Onan stayed with me. I've got a 20 horsepower Onan that runs spectacularly. So anybody who needs a vertical shaft Onan 20 horse that does everything it's supposed to do, let me know. And I pulled all the wiring right down to the ignition. So if you're needing one, hit me up. Now let's get this up here. Well, I need to show you this. When the lifter collapsed, you can see the lifter down deep in there. When the lifter collapsed, it allowed the push rod to be slacked when the cam lobe was not on a stroke to move the rocker arm. And when that happened, the rocker arm actually twisted this way, and it came over and it caught just the edge of the spring and the keeper, just enough that it ejected the keepers, but everything stayed together. And then that rocker arm poked through the top of the head, the top of the valve cover, right next to the crank breather hole. The crank breather's off of it right now, but where'd I put the crank breather? Put it with the air filter there, with the PCV valve. It came up and it whacked that pretty good. So, but I've got a new grommet. The canister's okay, so we're going to reuse that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to disassemble all the sheet metal. We have a broken bolt that we have to extract. It did not want to come out, and these are arguing. It's, you know, a 24-year-old engine, and it's steel into aluminum, and the owner of the engine was constantly washing it, so he obviously didn't wash great because there's a boatload of crap on this engine, but all that's going to get cleaned off. You can see the external. That makes it real nice and easy to change the filter and the oil cooler. Everything will get cleaned up. We'll clean the whole thing. But we're going to get all the tins off, get this head off, get that lifter out, get everything reassembled. I am reusing this rocker arm and this push rod, this exhaust valve spring, the perch, the keeper, and the keepers cap and the keepers. So all that's going to be retained and put on the new head. But of course I'll take this, and as soon as I make room to get over to the parts washer, I'll use my hoist and take it over and put it in the parts washer and get it cleaned up real good once we get all the tins off of it. And I can see evidence here. You see this? All that. I have a feeling we're going to have a nice surprise when we open this thing up. But let me get to that point. I'll show you what's underneath that blower housing. Alright, let's see what kind of surprises we've got under here. Up and over. Well, I've got quite a bit of buildup here, just from a leaky valve cover. A lot of buildup there. That could have attributed to the wow, a whole ton of buildup there. Could have attributed, see how clean this one is over here? How built up that is. That could have attributed to the failure. So now we'll get the intake runner off, course, a bunch more wires. That right there is for the throttle. Then we've got our solenoid connection there, so we'll have to cut those wire ties, but I'm just going to unbolt it, take off what we need to take off so that we can leave most of what's wired up, and then we'll get that shield off, we'll get the other shield off on the other side, so we can get in there and just really give this thing a nice good bath. But you know, we look down here and look at the back where the oil lines go in. It's just a yummy cruddy mess there too, and it may just be loose fittings that are bleeding off a little bit of oil, but again, 24 years old, and it's the first failure this engine has had. So, and we'll pull the PCV, the crank vent right there, out. I guess that other part was a separator, but we'll get it all apart. I want to clean this before I relieve this head of its duty. I guess I can take that old gasket off. We're not going to need it anymore. And yeah, I can probably tell from my voice I'm starting to get a little bit tired. But I got as far as I wanted to get today, which was getting the engine out. And to give you guys an idea how long that oil's been leaking, let me just do a little scraping here and show you. That's not just a small pile of clippings. So, but everything else looks fairly decent. We'll get all that cleaned up, scraped up, and taken care of. Now I can't touch the camera to shut it off, so I guess you guys are just gonna have to sit there until the battery dies. Alright, I'm gonna conclude part 1. I'm gonna go ahead and stop part 1. The next part is just going to be you guys seeing the engine after I have cleaned it. I need to put the oil fill back in there. So that we don't drop anything in there, and I'll throw that bolt back in too. Come here, bolt. I believe, nope, it would have been a machine screw. Let's get the machine screw that would have been in there. Let me look. Yeah, it would have been a machine screw. You guys won't have to sit there and watch me do that now, do you? Unless you insist. Are you insisting on watching? Just want to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. There we go. Good enough. Good enough. Good enough. Just keep from getting any oil down or any junk down in the engine, and that'll come off now too. Lots of fun, lots to clean off. But once it's clean and that new head is on, we'll bench run it before we put it back in the tractor. I'll have to chase the wires, make sure I get the fuel solenoid open, and make sure I've got power to the coils. But we're going to, wow, there's a whole bunch of junk packed up in here too. You see all that? Look at that. Wow. Yep. So this head's nice and clean and didn't fail. This head's, it probably just overheated, caused that lifter to seize and through the push rod, caused the rocker to get off center. But we'll get her back together. That's it, guys. There's part 1. I promise you I will see you on the next one. Right down there where I'm pointing. If you're not subscribed, you can subscribe right there. And here's a couple of videos. If you haven't seen them, click on them. We'll see you on the next one. Don't forget that thumbs up.